Greetings, my viewers. As always, Ruslan Belov is with you, and today we'll be covering many interesting and important updates. Before we begin, I sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel, like it, and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. Friends, over the past 24 hours, the front has seen developments of real significance in the sector commanded by Group Center. So much so that even the adversary is audibly on edge. We often highlight Group East for its impressive pace, and that remains true, but right now the fighters of Group Center are delivering results that can fairly be called extraordinary. Let us proceed step by step. There are 4 active axes here: the Pokrovsk sector, the Mirnohrad sector, the Rodinska sector, and the Dobropilya sector. We will begin with Pokrovsk. At this moment, extremely fierce fighting is unfolding on the grounds of the Pokrovska mine. This site is effectively the strongest Ukrainian defensive hub anywhere along the Pokrovsk-Dobropilya line. The complex is massive, the country's largest coking coal mine, and, unsurprisingly, deeply fortified. Yesterday, footage appeared showing Russian aircraft striking the area with high-explosive aerial bombs. What is the situation on the ground? Our units have established themselves on the eastern outskirts of the industrial zone, yet the main fortified core remains under Ukrainian control. Air power is now methodically dismantling that strongpoint, dropping bomb after bomb to turn long-term firing positions and shelters into shattered concrete. It is obvious that you cannot erase such a belt of fortifications in a single sortie, and it may take far more than a handful of munitions, but inflicting damage sufficient to degrade the garrison and render it partially combat ineffective is a realistic objective, and that would make the subsequent assault much easier. In the broader picture, 2 decisive fights are proceeding in parallel, and their outcomes will shape the fate of Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad. The first is the battle for the mine itself. The second is the struggle for Rodinsky. We will return to Rodinska shortly. There is meaningful movement there as well. Concerning the mine, its capture opens the road towards Serhivka and Hryshino. That, in turn, amounts to a decisive break because sustaining the Ukrainian grouping in Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad would become extremely difficult, if not impossible. A well-regarded mapper with direct channels to units on the ground posted an updated overlay with an interesting claim. According to his depiction, our forces have brought a segment of the M30 highway under control and secured a fuel station, then advanced from that point along a tree line northward, precisely toward Hryshino. If these reports bear out, the distance from our current line to Hryshino's edge is less than 1.5 kilometers. This still needs confirmation, yet the overall progress is plain. A Ukrainian military commentator has already conceded Russian gains and is visibly alarmed, noting that if the mine falls and a push into Hryshino is executed, it could spell the end for Pokrovsk. Nor are the Ukrainian problems limited to that sector. On the Mirnohrad axis, the situation has also tightened for them. Our troops managed to seize 2 settlements in a rapid move and entered the urban area. During the day, footage of fighting from the village of Balahan emerged, and by evening came confirmation that the locality was under our control. Additionally, our forces moved into Moskovka, which Ukrainian sources often list as Kazatske, and took a substantial portion of it. From reliable sources, we have that detachments then penetrated into Mirnohrad via Sedov Street and consolidated positions there. Does this automatically mean a full-scale assault on Mirnohrad has begun? More likely not. There is little sense in plunging into prolonged, attritional street combat absent strategic need, because the true decision will come not inside dense city blocks, but through reaching Hryshino and Rodinske and splitting the Ukrainian grouping into 2. Pressure is being applied regardless, that is clear. But the key hinge, where the outcome is decided, lies elsewhere. That hinge is the town of Rodinske, a small pre-war settlement of roughly 10,000 inhabitants. Here, Russian forces have notched serious gains. First, there has been an advance south of the town, with a move to the railway lines and the main roadway the Ukrainians were using to bring reserves toward the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad sector. At a single rail crossing, up to 25 destroyed vehicles were counted. Equipment the Ukrainian side had attempted to push through, which was taken out by drones and aviation. Second, our units entered Rodinska proper from the south. After mopping up Krasny Lyman, which abuts the city limits, assault groups pushed into town and advanced along Yuzhnaya Street and Zarekhnaya Street. Additional headway was recorded in the eastern part, where several properties were brought under control. The result is a new front geometry. In practical terms, the town is under operational encirclement. Supply along the primary roads is interdicted by fire. Attempts to approach from Beletsky are close to suicidal. The distance from our line to the road is less than 1.5 kilometers, and any vehicle trying that corridor is highly likely to be hit. Bringing anything across the fields from Hryshino is also unrealistic. Columns would almost certainly not make it through. Consequently, it is reasonable to expect further positive reports from this area on a timescale of about a week, perhaps a couple of weeks, provided the current tempo is maintained. Now to the Dobropilya sector, which delivered a genuinely encouraging set of reports. First, Russian units pushed forward roughly 1.5 kilometers along the railway, while simultaneously shifting the line of contact away from Suketske. As a result of this thrust, the current Russian line sits less than 2 kilometers from another locality, Beletsky. In addition, there was an advance of about 800 meters north of Suvorova. Yet the principal development is different. A number of previously lost positions in Boykovka have been recovered. In early autumn, the enemy managed to enter the village and hold its southern part. Now the defense has been restored, and Boykovka is fully under Russian control. Part of the ground around Novotoretske has also been regained, though not all of it, yet the southern edge remains a grey zone. Given the present geometry of the front, it is evident the enemy is unlikely to dig in here for long, and this strip will likely be colored red in the near term. As for Vladimirovka, the northern outskirts have been completely cleared, and the settlement is under total Russian control. Moreover, from Vladimirovka, the advance continued, with the entire belt of terrain cleared all the way to the Kazeni Torets River. By the logic of events, full-scale battles for Sharkov should begin soon. As noted before, Sharkov, Sofiivka and Toretska form the key triad, the lock and key of this entire node. Should Russian forces secure these localities, the front will naturally shift toward Druzhkivka. With a favorable tempo, and if those villages are taken by mid-November, the line could, by year's end, reach the approaches to Druzhkivka. Even Ukrainian military commentators are writing about this scenario, and doing so with evident concern, which raises the obvious question about the earlier bold talk of 3 cauldrons, attributed to Syrsky and Zelensky. Where is the promised outcome? Overall, on the Dobropilya axis, the initiative has passed entirely to Russian forces. On the Ukrainian side, talk of cutting off a salient has essentially evaporated. On the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad sector, the picture is similar. Operational initiative lies with Russia, and the odds of taking those cities by year's end are not only intact but steadily improving. The decisive choke points are unchanged, securing Hryshino and tightening the operational grip around Rodinske. If a firm hold is established in Hryshino and Rodinske is taken, the conclusion is straightforward. Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad will not hold for long. The chances of that happening before the new year are assessed as fairly high. Switching to the Dnipropetrovsk area, a concise situation brief. Russian armed forces report gains near Poltavka and in the vicinity of Uspenivka. Active combat continues around Okhotniche, Verbova and Alexeyevka. From the Filia side, Russian troops are advancing toward Novopavlivka along both banks of the Solonaya River, while clearing ground west of the channel. On the Kostyantinivka axis, fighting is underway on the approaches to the city. Russian forces are also moving forward north of Oleksandr Shultin and east of Ivanopilia. Kiev-aligned sources acknowledge the presence of Russian reconnaissance and sabotage groups in the southeastern districts of Kostyantinivka. There are reports of an explosion on the Tolyatti-Odessa ammonia pipeline near Rusin Yar. It appears to have been a Ukrainian sabotage action intended to slow the Russian advance. The Defense Ministry stressed there were no casualties, since the pipeline has not been in active use since 2014. Siversk sector. Russian troops have transitioned to full urban fighting inside Siversk, operating in small maneuver groups, according to military analyst Andrei Morochko. At the same time, the line is being gradually straightened near Vyemka. Kiev is pulling reserves into Yampil in an effort to hold that settlement as the logistic key to the Siversk grouping. Clashes also continue around Dranivka. Lyman sector. The confrontation remains largely positional, with engagements near Novoselivka, Derelov, Stavki and Zarekny. Kharkiv sector. Vovchansk, Liptsy, Kazacha Lopan, that northern arc relative to the regional center. Here, retired Colonel Gennady Alyokin reports a positional phase, especially on the left bank of the Vovcha River, where supply to the remnants of 2 Ukrainian brigades has been effectively choked off. What resupply there is comes via Chuhuiv and Pechenihi. Near Liptsy, assault elements of the Sever grouping are operating on both sides of the Travanskoye Reservoir, pressing toward the commanding heights around the village where the enemy maintains its defense. Kupiansk area remains one of the most intense. Battles are ongoing within the city limits. Weather has turned against both sides. Rains and autumn mud are reshaping operations. Units of the Western grouping are expanding control zones around Kupiansk, Kucherivka, Petropavlivka, Shpakivska, Novoselivka. Field reports suggest a narrow neck of roughly 300 meters still connects the Ukrainian garrison to its supply route, preventing a fully sealed encirclement for now. Some outlets have claimed a Russian flag was raised over the Kupiansk city administration downtown, but it is prudent not to rush judgment and to await official confirmation from the Defense Ministry. Zaporizhzhia front. Fighting continues along the Stepnohirsk-Primorske arc, with no significant line changes recorded. Sumy direction. Airborne assault elements advanced roughly 400 meters on the right flank of the Sever grouping and consolidated. Around the village of Alexeyevka, Ukrainian forces keep attempting to claw back positions, pulling reserves from other sectors to mount attacks. Near Andreevka, Russia's aerospace forces are striking troop locations. And finally, several important political strategic notes. In his memoir, former NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg recounts an exchange in which Joe Biden referred to Volodymyr Zelensky as a pain in one place, reacting to Zelensky's insistence on hard language in the 2023 NATO summit communiqué regarding Ukraine's membership perspective. Stoltenberg also writes that, in 2022, a prevailing assessment within the alliance held that Kiev might fall within days and the remainder of Ukraine within weeks. Venezuela. President Nicolas Maduro ordered the armed forces to be ready for a possible U.S. strike. Russia's UN envoy Vasily Nebenzia urged Washington to immediately halt escalation over Venezuela and avoid an irreparable mistake, noting what he called U.S. use of color revolution methods to force regime change. Reports described the most powerful U.S. naval grouping in the Caribbean in 3 decades. China's UN envoy, Fu Kong, called on the United States to cease strikes on vessels off Venezuela's coast. The New York Times reports that Venezuelan officials approached the Trump administration with proposals to grant U.S. companies access to portions of Venezuela's oil and other resources in hopes of de-escalation. According to the paper, Maduro was ready to open existing and future oil and gold projects to U.S. firms, divert significant oil exports from China to the United States, and sharply curtail contracts with Chinese, Iranian, and Russian partners. The overtures were rejected and escalation continued. Separately, the US-China trade confrontation is entering a new phase. The core geopolitical knot remains unchanged. Washington and Beijing, the world's 2 dominant economic centers, are unwilling to accept parity with each other, making prolonged rivalry inevitable. Plans have been outlined under which, starting on the 1st of November 2025, Washington will impose additional tariffs on Chinese goods under the formula all previous tariffs plus 100% in response to Beijing's export controls, themselves tied to limits on China's access to U.S. technology and products. Among the cited consequences is disruption to the commercial rollout schedule of the narrow-body C-919 airliner intended to compete with the Boeing 737 and Airbus A320 families. Finally, North Korea unveiled the new Hwasong-20 intercontinental ballistic missile, claiming it can carry multiple nuclear warheads and reach up to 15,000 kilometers. At the parade where it was displayed, Kim Jong-un emphasized the unity of an anti-Western axis in the presence of Dmitry Medvedev and DPRK Premier Li Qiang. That's all from me. Thank you all for watching, and please support me by subscribing to the channel. See you later.